You are listening to
PackersTalk.com. This Green Bay Packers podcast is brought to you by Mayfield Sports Marketing, our official sports marketing agent for player appearances. To book a Packers player for your next event, go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances. Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If the Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Amanda, come in.
10-4.
Have you infiltrated the security system yet?
Locked and loaded. Ready to lower myself into the enemy war room.
I'm lowering you down now.
I have access. The Packers are in for a tough one this week. I need the password to proceed.
The password is read option.
I hate that password.
Me too. You know which wires to cut.
Always go for the green and gold. Here we go. I'm Amanda Geffre.
And I'm Chris Callaway, and you're going with us behind enemy lines. Welcome to another week of Packers football and Behind Enemy Lines, a podcast hosted through PackersTalk.com. You can find us on iTunes at PackersTalk.com, as well as on Twitter at EnemyLinesGB. I'm one of the hosts, Chris Callaway, on Twitter at CCallaway33, and I'm joined, as always, by my dear friend and fellow owner, Amanda, who you can find on Twitter at Amanda R. Geffre. The Packers beat the Redskins in the wildcard matchup last weekend and will return to sunny Arizona this Saturday night to take on the Cardinals. Amanda, have you gotten over your pessimism about the team from last week, and are you ready to finally believe again?
I'm getting there.
You're getting there.
I mean, it definitely looked better, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You like that?
I mean, you like that? Yes, I did.
Okay. There was a lot to like.
There was a lot to like.
The first quarter, however, was not one of those things.
No, but you know what? I'll take the other three. I feel like first quarter is probably the best quarter to be bad in.
That's fair. You know, get better as the game progresses.
Right.
I guess the first quarter gave me a couple of things to chuckle at, like a 2-0 score and a 5-0 score and 11-0 and then 7-11. Those are just weird football scores that you don't see that often. So
it's true.
I guess I just had that to kind of fall back on.
That's a very good point. It was really weird scoring.
That's astute analysis by me.
I don't know that I chuckled. Oh, look at that. Sucked Aaron Rodgers in the end zone. That really wasn't how I reacted, but, you know, whatever.
I mean, I imagine you as, like, portly man smoking a cigar when you talk like that.
Right, with my glass of bourbon.
Right. But, I mean, okay. The what do you call them? The Redskins finally went down and got that touchdown to make it 11-0. But once he doinked it off the upright, and it was, you know, only
that was comical.
It was kind of felt like, okay, maybe this game is going to be okay. There was something about that moment right there where I was like, oh, okay, this obviously could be going worse right now. And the Packers turned around and had a pretty good drive right after that to answer with a touchdown pass to Randall Cobb, which came on a pass play in which the Packers caught them. I think it was 12 men on the field at that point. You know, one of those patented Aaron Rodgers moves, but that worked. I mean, there was something about that spark, that little kind of trivial thing that he's done it so many times, but it really, in my opinion, was the spark last Sunday that would have been.
Well, I mean, I think it kind of showed all the flaws that the Redskins had as a team. I mean, yeah, they got into the playoffs, but also if you look at their division, it was god-awful. So there's something to be said for that, and I think Aaron Rodgers and the offense were able to pick that apart slowly, and part of that was on, like, the 12 men on the field and silly penalties like that. I mean, there was things that you should know. You should know in reviewing tape that Aaron Rodgers does that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like the Packers were able to capitalize on those things, and that kind of helped us get our momentum going.
Right, and there was, it came from the coaching staff a little bit, I think, picking up the tempo, going no huddle, stuff like that. But some of that is just that innate ability from Aaron Rodgers. And I know we watch the Packers, obviously, more than any other team, but I wonder how hard that is to prepare for. And if other quarterbacks do it as well as he does. I know everybody kind of talks about Rodgers as the king of that facet of the game, but
right.
Is it possible to prepare for that in practice? Because there's nothing that really simulates the real game. I mean, you can do it as well as you can in practice, but you're still going against yourself and kind of knowing what you're practicing. You know what I'm saying there? Like, I wonder how hard that really is.
Yeah, I have no idea, because a lot of that too depends on the atmosphere at the game. There's a lot of times when he's tried to get the defense on the hard count, and it hasn't worked because it's been too loud, and so he's been overpowered by other stadiums or what, you know what I mean? So, like, I don't know how you prepare for that. I guess maybe you just kind of test it, and what I don't know.
I mean, it comes down to discipline, I guess, and being ready to go. But he's fooled so many teams time and time again that I hope he's able to do it this weekend against Arizona. But I want to come back to one thing. You talked about the atmosphere at the game. Obviously, when things were going well for the Redskins, Kirk Cousins on that rushing touchdown in particular, where he kind of spread the defense out and then ran right up the middle for the touchdown, you could hear the "you like that" chants coming from FedEx Field. Obviously, the game progresses. The Packers take over, eventually win semi-convincingly. And Randall Cobb in the tunnel after the game saying, you like that, just like Kirk Cousins did a couple of weeks ago. But then there are people calling him out being a bad sport, saying, why would Randall Cobb stoop to that level? I mean, what did you kind of take away from Cobb's celebration there in the tunnel?
I didn't take anything from it. I was like, yeah, he's pumped up.
Mm-hmm.
You like that. And, I mean, if you're the away team and you've got the crowd chanting against you and that's what they're chanting, it's going to be stuck in your head. And then when you give it right back to them, heck yeah, you're going to chant. I don't know. I didn't think anything of it. It's not like he was saying anything mean or offensive. I'm sure they could have thought of a lot of other things to say.
Right.
I don't know. I also, when they started chanting that, I didn't know until I went on Twitter that that's what they were chanting. I thought they were chanting USA, and I was like, oh, we're all from America here.
Yeah, but they're from the nation's capital, so maybe
yeah, I
they're
was like,
more
okay.
But, I saw some Vikings fans saying that on, social media, oh, way to be classy, Packers, and I know they were already salty.
They lost,
I know they were already salty, but I don't know. It would seem like a classic case of, we can dish it out, but we can't take it.
Well, yeah, and honestly, it could have been any other team. People would have said the same thing. It could have gone the other way. It's just you're always going to have people who are offended by something, and then I don't know. He was excited. Leave him alone. He
right.
didn't do anything mean.
I mean, they won a playoff game.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen for many teams.
And he had
all that often.
Catches.
What?
He had some great catches. Randall Cobb had a good game.
How about that? Randall Cobb coming back to life. Devontae Adams coming back from the dead. James Jones down the middle I thought was huge. And, I mean, was that more of a byproduct of the Packers' tempo increasing and then those guys are kind of the result? Or is it the other way around where these guys are performing and then the tempo increases it? Or is it, the chicken and the egg thing there? How do you see it?
Yeah, I don't. I kind of think it has something to do with the tempo. It goes back to when we talked about Aaron Rodgers catching the defense, getting them on certain penalties and just getting them off a little bit, and that kind of put it's like it clicked. Everything started clicking into place at that moment. And
I'll tell you the word.
What?
The word you're looking for is rhythm.
Yeah, rhythm. Thank you.
And
I don't know. I like to click. But yeah, they just seemed to. Everybody was working together. I don't know. It's something we haven't seen in a while, and when we see it, it has been just moments and just bits and pieces of it. This was for 3 solid quarters, and that felt good. We are spoiled fans, and we're not used to being thrown off of our rhythm. So it felt good to be singing a good song.
And I meant that in the sense that, you could see it kind of just perpetuate itself, one play after the next. And, I think that's where Mike McCarthy is at his best. It got a little stagnant at times over the past, month plus. But, once things are going good, they get better that much quicker.
Right.
It was a game that they were down 11-0 and ended up winning by 17 points. They almost doubled up the Redskins in that game. It got everybody involved. You saw, the passing attack, what that did, opening up the rushing game later on.
Yeah.
Those big runs by Eddie Lacy down the left side, and then I guess Starks on the left side as well. Both were big plays and, churning the clock, just kind of the finishing blow. And that was awesome to see that balance come back.
Right, yeah, no. I mean, we were able to see our offense have multiple dimensions, and we've been missing that. That's either our passing game's been completely off, or our running game hasn't been there, or neither. Frankly,
right, and it wasn't record-setting numbers by any stretch. I mean, Rodgers had 210 yards, and I think they were at about 150 yards rushing, but that was more than enough.
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with they only had the focus of one game. Only this game matters right now. I think last couple of weeks, the last couple weeks of the regular season, the division was up in the air. Who could win that? And then you're thinking about who are we going to play in the playoffs? What's going to happen? Who's going to get which seat? There was too many things going on, and I felt like we were trying to accomplish all of them. And now it was just we just have to win. That's the only thing that matters, is that we win this game. It doesn't really matter how ugly it is. We need to win. Otherwise, we're done.
That's very true. And there was a good quote from out of the locker room from Clay Matthews, where he said, "The reality of this is if you win, you move on to the NFC Championship game. If you lose, then it's another season in which you have regret." Do you buy into that? Kind of, this point of the playoffs is kind of the tipping point where whether you call it a successful season or not?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this before. What would you consider a successful season? And at this point, yeah, they're either going to move on, or they're going to be wow, we could have done better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's either going to be Seattle or Carolina on the other side, and I got to say, I don't feel great about that prospect, but I didn't feel great about Arizona, looking at it before starting the playoffs, but something about the way they played against the Redskins kind of reinstilled some hope and some true optimism. So let's see if we can get that shot down, though, by our guest this week.
Right, well, and I think we'll have to bring it up to our guest, the Cardinals didn't actually end their season on the brightest note.
They certainly did not. That thumping by the aforementioned Seattle Seahawks. So let's bring him on and see what he thinks.
All right, sounds good. Now we'd like to welcome our guest, Jess Root, to the show. Jess covers the Arizona Cardinals for RevengeOfTheBirds.com. You can find his work and follow him on Twitter at Senior Jess Root. Welcome to the show, Jess. We're glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, obviously, we have a lot to get to about this pending rematch between the Packers and the Cardinals. But first, we want to know how you're feeling as a fan. What were your expectations at the beginning of the season, and what are they now, given the fact that Arizona is one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl?
Well, entering the season, there was a lot of confidence in fans, but there was concern. They'll say, well, it all sort of hinged on the play of Carson Palmer. Would he be healthy, one, and would he be able to bounce back and play at a high level, if not at the same level he was playing in the second half of 2013 and the level he was playing for those 6 games that he played in 2014. Really sort of playoffs was the expectation. I personally thought I couldn't, before the season, say confidently that they would win the division over the Seahawks, just because Seattle was still super talented and been there and done that. And so, but playoffs were the expectation. Things took off. they played well. They had the hiccup against St. Louis and the hiccup in Pittsburgh, and then it started looking like, wait, this is something. They came out of the bye, and then, okay, here's the true test, and then they just buzzsawed their way through the toughest part of the schedule, beating, NFC West rival on the road, playoff teams, pretty much everything, and culminating into that number 2 seed clinching game against Green Bay, when it sort of just climaxed everything in terms of performance. Now entering a playoff. I mean, I've never seen a season like this before, because even back at the playoff runs the Cardinals had with Kurt Warner, one in 2008, they kind of backed into the playoffs with a bad division. Kind of like you look at the Washington team that then made the playoffs this year, or the Carolina team that made the playoffs last year. They were playing in a bad division, but they got hot, and so there were no expectations of anything that year. After they went to the Super Bowl, the expectations raised, and they played at a high level. And that's the season where they played the Packers and had that incredible shootout, and then eventually got buzzsawed by the eventual champs and the Saints. But now entering the playoffs, the stakes have risen. They've increased, and as a fan and a fan covering the team as well, this season becomes a wasted season if they don't at least get to the Super Bowl because of the type of talent. And last year was one of those years too. They were playing as well as they did, only to have it fall apart because of injuries like Carson Palmer and such. And so last year became a wasted season in terms of the window and the talent they had. Because they maintained that, they have to make the Super Bowl, or again, it's a wasted season.
Well, we'll get into a lot of the things you mentioned coming up in just a bit, but I believe this is the first time that the Cardinals have ever had a bye in the postseason. So
correct.
You were able to kind of sit back last week and just kind of watch the first round of the playoffs unfold. So how was that like for you as a fan? And was there an outcome you were maybe hoping for over the other, one team that you wanted to see come to Arizona this weekend?
Well, it was weird because, usually this time of year, if your team's not playing, it's because you're done, and so you're sort of sad, and you're picking a team either to root against or of the teams that are remaining, which players do you like the most and hope that they do the best. But this time around, it was all right. It's a week. It was like for the players, it was a week off, and so we could sit back and watch some football and kind of relax on the weekend. And for a guy like me who also does a lot of coverage for the Cardinals, it was a kind of a welcome weekend off. Because this time of year, at the end of the season, it's a grind. But, personally, what I wanted to see, if anything else, just some variety, I wanted to see Washington, personally, but that was only because we hadn't seen them. And to do something a little bit different, I personally there's a little bit of worry inside me as a fan when you face a team in the playoffs that you've already seen and beaten in the regular season. And I can point back to both the two playoff runs back with Kurt Warner, because the Cardinals went through teams that they had lost to during the regular season in their Super Bowl run. And then again in the playoffs, after they faced the Packers 2 consecutive weeks, and so I worry about that a little bit.
The Packers have definitely been on the other end of that, and we can point directly to the Giants and thank them for debunking us in the playoffs a couple of years ago. But they earned the bye. The Cardinals closed the regular season with a clunker, losing 36-6 to Seattle. With a week off to shake that off, are you worried about anything carrying over for Arizona from week 17 until now?
Some teams I would. This team I don't, because one, the way they played previous to that week, and two, because of the loss, and then I'll give you a little perspective on when it happened. That game was your classic letdown game, because going in, they had a little bit of hope of getting that number 1 seed, but not much.
Right.
They experienced a little bit of adversity early in the game against a Seattle team that was very motivated, even though they didn't really have anything really to play for other than pride. because the Cardinals had gone into Seattle and really sort of whipped them. The score was tight, but if you look across statistically, it was a dominant game by the Cardinals. So that team was very proud and wanted to come in there and make a statement. And the Cardinals experienced the excuse me that adversity early, and I saw that fight through it and get that first touchdown. But after that Carson Palmer interception, combined with the score against Carolina, it's like they said they weren't willing to put forth all the effort and sort of packed it up and kind of let the game go. And after that game in that locker room, if you've been in the locker room around players or watched some post-game thing after a loss, especially against a rival, they're upset, they're hurt, they're frustrated. It was very, now we're moving on to the playoffs. It was like they didn't care, almost.
Well, Aaron Rodgers said this week that the pressure is all on the Cardinals, and I can see where he's coming from. They're the ones defending their home field, so on. And I know you kind of addressed it on your site this week, but do you kind of buy into that mentality that the pressure here is on Arizona?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the Cardinals have more to lose because of what they've done during the regular season. If they're to lose this game, you'd go down with some of those classic choke jobs of the one-and-done Colts after a great season, a one-and-done Chargers team, one-and-done Chiefs team, with those Marty Schottenheimer coach teams. But this team, pressure is when you feel pressure. So pressure only exists when you feel it. The Cardinals have high expectations of themselves, so they've already put that sort of pressure on them to begin on, and they've done that all season. So while both have the same thing to lose in terms of loser goes home, the Cardinals could fall from a higher place. And there's a lot of fans around here who are talking and analysts who are saying, well, it's kind of a silly thing it's kind of trying to deflect. It's like, is Aaron Rodgers trying to deflect away from the some of the shortcomings that team might have, or take some of the ease away from their teammates when a comment like that can come from out of fear or desperation. And yes, the Cardinals have more to lose, but I'd rather be in that position than the other, honestly.
Well, it's been less than a month since that 38-8 beatdown put on Green Bay by the Arizona Cardinals in Week 16. And that game got a bit out of hand with a couple of defensive touchdowns. But what was your biggest takeaway from that game in particular?
Well, how sideways it got in a hurry. Because you saw that the first two drives were competitive. Green Bay was getting after Carson Palmer, sacked him twice in the same drive. It was, Green Bay moved the ball a little bit early. So you saw what was the making of a really good hard-fought matchup. When B.J. Raji went out with the concussion, with the head injury, then it sort of fell apart. And then you had a couple of balls bounce the other way, and then combined with all the injuries that Green Bay was there, they were already down to left tackle, and they lost a couple other linemen. Sam Shields was out, they lost Raji. Things fell apart, and because the Cardinals got ahead a little bit, made Green Bay turn to the passing game, then the floodgates just let loose, and just, it went sideways. That's not a type of game. I don't think Cardinals are 30 points better than the Packers, and those types of games you typically feel are aberrations, especially against playoff teams.
I think,
but it was a game that got away, sort of like the very next week with the Cardinals. Things got away from them, and then said, "Okay, let's just let it finish up and just let all the bad happen."
I think an aberration is a good word. I mean, those guys injured, 9 sacks, 2 touchdowns on defense, I should say, for the Cardinals. Is now that the Packers are a little bit healthier, you said it's not going to be a 30-point game, but what kind of things do you think might be similar from that game to this game?
Well, you look at the Cardinals' offense. Green Bay's been pretty solid defensively all year. That's been the strength of their team, I think, overall. The offense, as you know, has not looked like a Green Bay offense of the past when they have all their weapons. And if you look at, even solid as Green Bay's defense has been, you take a look at the Cardinals' offense, there hasn't been a single team that's really done anything to stop them. If the Cardinals don't turn the ball over, they score points. And so I think that this game will still be a case where the Cardinals can still move the ball up and down the field. It's a matter of the confidence level. Can Green Bay run the ball? And will Aaron Rodgers, with his newfound confidence and his smile back and getting kind of his moxie and swag going again, will he be a playoff caliber quarterback? But I think that the Cardinals' offense is strong enough that it will wear down Green Bay.
Well, kind of the bigger picture here, coming back to the defense, what has to go right for Arizona defensively, not only for them to win this weekend, but to be the last team standing when the playoffs are over?
Their defense is built on a couple of principles. One, they shut down the run, and then they cover well down the field. They don't have a great pass rush. They don't have, other than Dwight Freeney for a few, because he's limited in what he does. He's very limited. He plays 20, 25 snaps and does so in only certain formations and packages. They don't have anyone who can just beat that one-on-one guy. So it's scheming, it's effort, and it's coverage pressure. And so what is a perfect blueprint for the Cardinals is they shut down the run early. Offensively, they get some points on the board, and then they'll let their secondary do the rest, because their secondary can cover so well overall.
And then I was looking on your site this week as well, kind of moving to the offense now. In a post you wrote for Revenge of the Birds, you talked about how Carson Palmer has been checking off the boxes since he got to Arizona, with one big one, winning a playoff game, still unchecked for him. You said he's proved the doubters wrong, but what about his legacy, and I use that in quotes, changes with a win this weekend?
I don't think his legacy changes much with a win this weekend. He gets to the Super Bowl, and I think it completely turns around what people see in his career. Right now, the biggest knock from what because as an outsider, I really didn't know much about Carson Palmer other than the Cincinnati saga. And what I saw was, from afar, that's, while I am definitely pro-player in terms of what they do with their career, because the NFL chews up players personally, you felt that, he was a bit of a diva, if you must. And when you look at statistically, he's never really elevated his teams. Even you look at a Peyton Manning, you took Peyton Manning off the Colts, and they were just awful. Carson Palmer on those Bengals teams, except for a couple of instances, were just pretty bad even with him. And so I never felt like necessarily that he wasn't able to win playoff games. He just wasn't the caliber of quarterback to be the reason why a team succeeds and goes to the playoffs. And in Arizona, yes, he's had more talent around him than he had before, but he proved that wrong. And just getting one playoff win, but if you see him get to the Super Bowl, I think his career is completely different in terms of outlook. Instead of a disappointment, a journeyman, he becomes a late bloomer.
Well, one of Palmer's weapons, David Johnson, has really emerged late in the season, and to me, he looks like the real deal and a complementary component that this passing attack needed. In your mind, what sort of balance between pass and run makes this offense click the best?
Well, that's, Bruce Arians loves to throw the ball. But with this year, it's sort of everything's put together. I think this is the best offense Bruce Arians ever had statistically. Most of his offenses have been pretty middle of the road in terms of points and yards, but they throw the ball a lot. He doesn't believe in necessarily having to have a running or necessarily a balanced attack, but rather a threat of the run. And now he's got more than that. He actually can run the ball successfully. When they're winning, it ends up being about 50-50. And that's because in a perfect scenario, you build up your lead, and then you run the ball to kind of close out the game. And that always skews the skew. And if you're losing, you end up passing a whole lot more because you can't use the run to run out the clock. It's one, a save time. You keep it pretty much in the NFL anymore. It's about 60-40 is 50-50. If you're passing 60% of the time, that's basically a 50-50 split. And if you keep it around that, that's ideal.
So I think we're all in agreement that it's going to be a little bit closer than a 30-point game this time around. But, overall, what kind of game do you see shaking out when the two teams meet 7:15 on Saturday night?
Here's what I expect, and it can be sort of game that the Cardinals have played against quality teams. Arizona's a good starter. I see them pulling ahead early. I see Green Bay being a quality team and Aaron Rodgers being a very good quarterback, rallying it and to bring it closer, and then having plays made down the stretch to be the difference in the game. And so far this season, those plays have been made by Arizona. And I see that blueprint, kind of that's the way they won against Minnesota. It's how they beat, Baltimore, they beat Seattle, they beat Cincinnati. You see them, they succeed early, the other team comes back, and then they make plays late. And this is the type of game I see happening as well, because that's kind of the blueprint of Cardinals games against quality opponents.
Chris, what are your thoughts on the game?
Well, I'm hoping it's not a 51-45 game like we saw.
Those are fun, though.
Yeah, well, when it doesn't end in a face mask and heartbreak, but that's neither here nor there. But, I was pretty down on the Packers coming into the playoffs, but there's something about that team that just kind of seemed rejuvenated a little bit last week. I think the offense is going to be there for the Packers again, and I expect them to get to 30 points, but I think the Cardinals are as well. And as much as I don't like it, I think the Cardinals are going to win somewhere in the 34-30 range. And maybe kind of like what you said, Jess, kind of Packers pulling back a little bit. And I think, it might be a little bit of that shootout, not quite like we saw 6-7 years ago, but, both teams in the 30s wouldn't surprise me.
Not at all. I actually think it might not be quite that many points on either side. I see this being a little less. I don't think the Cardinals even crack 30 unless, I think this will be more of a 27-20 or 28-20 type game, probably towards Arizona where they get within they pull within a field goal and then Arizona scores another field goal or a touchdown late or whatever it is to pull ahead. But I'm not sure it's going to be quite as many points for both sides because both have pretty solid defenses.
And Amanda, you probably split the difference between us somewhere, right?
Well, actually, I don't think it's going to be quite 30 points either, Jess. I see it more being a 28-24, so I think it's going to be a closer game. I think it's going to be one of those games that I absolutely hate watching because I'm on the edge of my seat, biting my nails, freaking out, throwing beer. Just kidding. But, it's going to be super intense. But since, Chris, what the heck, you've been trying to make me all, positive and whatnot all week about the Packers, and then you pick Arizona. I'm picking the Packers to win. I think they're going to pull a heartbreaker on the Cardinals. And I'm really sorry, Jess, but that's just the way it goes sometimes, and somebody's got to stand with our team. So and
if you look at it based on their postseason luck, last year you had the Bostic mess up. I mean, really, that game was ridiculous against Seattle at the end.
Oh God!
I think
you have the Arizona game way back when. So you guys did get yourselves a ring, but come on, it's Arizona. We've never had one ever.
I do think that Arizona could be one of those. It's one of those things where if Arizona loses, I'm actually going to feel really bad for them because they were one of the teams that I was like, I'd like to see them go to the playoffs. And then I realized, maybe not, because I'd rather go myself. But I
don't openly root against the Cardinals where I might as with the Seahawks.
Oh,
so
gosh,
there's that.
Root against Seahawks, but yeah. Yeah, well,
I think
Jess,
everyone does that, honestly.
Oh, Jess, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all the good insight that you gave us. And, good luck to your team. We will be rooting against them.
No problem, because I'll be rooting against the Pack as well. So,
thank you very much, Jess. We appreciate everyone for tuning in to another playoff edition of Behind Enemy Lines. We hope it's not our last edition of the year, but the Packers will have to take care of business against the Cardinals in the desert on Saturday night. Once again, you can find our podcast on Twitter at EnemyLinesGB. I'm Chris Callaway, and you can find me at CCallaway33.
And I'm Amanda Geffre. You can find me at Amanda R. Geffre. Thank you to our guest, Jess Root, for joining us. You can find him on Twitter at Senor Jess Root. Remember, check out all of our podcasts on PackersTalk.com and follow Behind Enemy Lines on Twitter at EnemyLinesGB. Until next time,
Go Pack, go!
This Green Bay Packers podcast is brought to you by Mayfield Sports Marketing, our official sports marketing agent for player appearances. To book a Packers player for your next event, go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances. Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If a Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.